next door.
Yeah. Now, the part that got me more mad about anything is, now you want to put me in jail? The reason I say put me in jail, she said he committed perjury. You go to jail for that if you lie under oath, bro. Now you want me to do 364 days. That's crazy. It's too late. You agree. You make man make $60 million a year and he got you for $1 million. I would have been dumb happy. I've been like, yo, dumb happy. I might, at this point, I'm like, yo, just take another 500,000 and leave me alone. But I feel him though. Cause he's like, I told you from the dribble, off the dribble, leave me alone and date the baby.
To this Aunt Edwards news, because Aunt Edwards' baby mama is claiming that he lied under oath about his business dealings in California. Apparently, he's evading his personal jurisdiction. He's hiding money for his child support obligations. I think this is the same baby's mama he paid over $1 million to go away, but she's not gone away. She's back.
She
Mo,
got $1 million, right?
Yeah, I think she got maybe a little more than that. Mo, what's your general thoughts on this news?
What else y'all want from me? What else do y'all want? What else do you want?
Yeah. Hey, I'm gonna steal stats saying, what is it? If you can get away with it, this is one of those things.
I gotta speak on this, Mo. I definitely gotta speak on this. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think it's the same baby mama that he ended up paying the entire child support up front, right? And the issue is that, you know, just like she finessed him and act like he liked her, like they say, right back ain't cheating. You know, now, you know, when it's time for me to pay up, I gotta, you know, hide my assets and put stuff off in the trust and put stuff off in other people's name. But she was devious for doing what she did. She's devious now for double back and trying to get money. So when he's acting like you know, you can't get mad that, yeah, you know, like who gets paid all of the child support money for 18 years up front and then is mad that you got to pay it all up front, then try to double back to try to get some more? Like, that's crazy. You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, he's dealing with a nothing. He dealt with a nothing, had a baby with a nothing, and now you have a nothing set of circumstances. That's all it is.
He needs discernment. Go ahead.
Yeah, showing a skillful use of underhanded tactics to get a goal accomplished. That's devious. She's skillful. Yeah. Is being skillful at underhanded tactics to get the goal you desire. That's what it means to be devious. Just for the listeners, you know, when normally Killer tells us what I meant by it. So I'm just telling you what Mo meant by it. She's very skillful at using underhanded tactics to get the job done. That's what he meant by the word. I'm not saying she's devious, but that's what devious means. But I would say this. He did give her the $1 million up front. I thought that was a generous gesture, especially if both of you agree. Because I'm not sure if both of you agree, but if they both agreed that this person didn't want to be in this situation, and he should be responsible to do something with the child. But if he wasn't going to be with the child, he did send the money, because I think that's the conversation we're having. Now, I know to raise a child, you have to be present and all of that. But she's not asking for time. She's asking for cash. She's not asking if he's available after the playoffs to come see the child. She's asking, is there more money somewhere? And I think that wasn't the goal, because once you gave the $1 million, I think the way that works, you got to sign off and say, you know what, that these situations are taken care of from now to 18 years old. Everything is taken care of. That's why it was tallied, it was calculated, and he sent the money. I think, and I'm kind of taken back because I took up for her. And then when she did it, you know, when it came out, say, you know, this is why guys don't fight, right? You can't fight for, I don't know how I'm gonna say this, but sometimes you feel bad fighting for a woman, if you know that she's going to do something like this, it could put you in a bad place. So you got to get this right, because guys want to be there to protect the woman. But when you do stuff like this, there's nothing to protect.
So this is just a case of somebody put her on because she didn't know how to do math. Like, it's not even nothing but that. Anthony Edwards has a deal worth $244 million, 5 years. Let's just say, to round it up to 250, right? And then for 5 years with the Timberwolves. Then he got a 5-year deal with Adidas for $50 million. So he gets $300 million the next 5 years. And so what's that, $60 million a year? Dollar Tree you. You went for it. You agreed to it. Nobody forced you to. Million, bet. I was like, yeah. Because that's only 5 years. He gonna make $1 billion before it's all said done. Nigga like 24, 25. Nigga dollar stores you. Don't get mad at him because you agreed to go to take the money for the dollar store. He makes $60 million a year for the next 5, and he dollar stores you. Now you like, somebody was like, yo, you stupid. How you gonna, why would you take $1 million when that nigga getting, you know how girl will sit there like, no, I was just thinking for the baby.
Put on. Yeah.
It's too late. You agreed. You man make $60 million a year, and he got you for $1 million. I would have been dumb happy. I've been like, yo, dumb happy. I might, at this point, I'm like, yo, just take another $500,000 and leave me alone. But I feel him though. Cause he's like, I told you from the dribble, off the dribble, leave me alone and date the baby. I'm not supporting that. I would be in the child's life, but he didn't lie to you. This niggas is sitting here and tell you they coming to get their kid and don't show up for 4 years.
Yeah, tell you he in L.A. and he in the next door.
Yeah, now the part that got me more mad about anything is, now you want to put me in jail? The reason I say put me in jail, she said he committed perjury. You go to jail for that if you lie under oath, bro. Now you want me to do 364 days. That's crazy. Like, yo, that's your fault. You should have thought about this before you did the deal. I'm not, listen, now I'm a sucker because I said what I said next. Tomorrow I'm gonna be a sucker. Like, Cam, he's supporting this shit. Because I'm reading what's going on. Whatever. Dollar treated you, dollar told you. You should have had some better advice. I should have got counsel, should have some better friends, something. You can't get mad at it. The deal's the deal. Yeah, and then she keep on going back to California. The judge said, take your ass back to Georgia. The crazy shit is, Anthony Edwards don't even play in California. What's this California? Yeah.
I told y'all that California is the lick. Pause. Soon as they tell you they're going to California, you see her with a California extra ID, you know what's going on. She live in New York, but she got an extra ID that says California.
Well, not just that, but the California lawyers know what time it is. They know how to extract money. They know how to get their piece of that money. It's a wild story. I think you're 100% right. When I saw that news come down, I was like, $1 million too for 18 years? How is that gonna break up when he's making his...
What you just witnessed was far more than another celebrity gossip discussion. It was 3 people attempting to untangle a situation sitting directly at the crossroads of wealth, fatherhood, celebrity status, and the law. And the longer you examine it, the more complicated this entire situation becomes. At first glance, the story centers on Anthony Edwards and a woman described as the mother of one of his children. But underneath that headline is a familiar cycle that has followed professional athletes and celebrities for generations. It is the story of what happens when a large payment is supposed to purchase peace, yet somehow that peace refuses to stay settled. So let's go back to the beginning, because that's where the entire dispute starts. Based on the claims being discussed, Anthony Edwards allegedly reached a financial settlement with the mother of his child, reportedly giving her around $1 million or potentially more, in an attempt to resolve the financial side of the child support situation with one major payment. Instead of sending payments month after month for 18 years, the concept was to satisfy the obligation up front, transfer a significant amount of money, and treat the matter as finished. And honestly, that kind of arrangement is not unheard of when it comes to wealthy professional athletes. Structured settlements, lump sum agreements, and one-time payments can give high earners more predictability, greater privacy, and what they believe is a clear finish line when dealing with someone they no longer want connected to them romantically or financially. But this is exactly where things get interesting. This is the twist that kept the hosts digging deeper throughout the discussion. The allegation now being raised is that this same woman claims Anthony Edwards gave false sworn testimony concerning his business activities in California. The accusation is that he may have been attempting to avoid personal jurisdiction, allegedly concealing money connected to his child support responsibilities, while the courts could ultimately have to determine whether the original agreement was actually being followed in good faith. That changes the entire temperature of the story. Suddenly, this isn't simply about relationship drama or a breakup that became public. Now the conversation involves allegations of perjury, sworn statements, and potentially serious legal consequences, including the possibility of jail time if a court were to determine that someone knowingly lied under oath. The hosts quickly focused on the emotional heart of the dispute, which comes down to two completely different versions of what happened. On one side is the argument that a young mother simply made the decision she believed would protect her child's financial future, accepted the settlement because it appeared responsible and practical at the time, and is now challenging it because she believes that payment no longer reflects what Anthony Edwards is actually making. But then there's the competing argument presented by at least one of the hosts. That version suggests the woman understood the situation from the beginning, deliberately worked the circumstances to her advantage, became pregnant through what started as a casual relationship, and is now allegedly attempting to turn that pregnancy into leverage for a larger financial outcome than the one already agreed upon. One host was especially direct, calling the woman's strategy devious, before quickly clarifying exactly what he meant by that description. He wasn't necessarily portraying her as some obvious villain from a movie. Instead,
it was talking about a particular ability, using questionable or calculated tactics successfully to reach a specific objective. And that distinction matters because it changes the discussion from simply asking who is morally right and turns it into an analysis of strategy. From their perspective, this wasn't somebody who accidentally wandered into an unfortunate situation. Their interpretation is that she understood the dynamics from the beginning and may now be attempting to play the game all over again. But then the discussion shifts when another host offers a softer counterpoint to that argument. He reminds everyone that Anthony Edwards did reportedly put up the $1 million up front. He views that as a substantial and generous move, particularly if both sides knowingly accepted those terms. And this is where the discussion becomes much more complicated, because now the real question is what that payment was actually designed to accomplish. Was the money intended to cover the complete financial responsibility for 18 years? Was it supposed to permanently eliminate every future obligation? Or was it simply an upfront good faith contribution that was never intended to prevent additional support later, especially if Anthony Edwards' income eventually exploded? That question sits at the center of almost every celebrity paternity dispute that spills into public view. Private agreements often look far less absolute once both sides begin remembering them differently. And memory can become extremely selective when children and enormous amounts of money enter the picture. What one person remembers as a payment that ended the entire issue can look to the other person like nothing more than the first major step. When two parties genuinely disagree about the meaning of a private agreement, the courts ultimately become the place where that disagreement has to be settled, and that appears to be where this situation could be heading. Now that allegations involving perjury and jurisdictional avoidance have been added to the original financial conflict, the hosts took time to examine the actual numbers behind the controversy. And this part deserves serious attention because the money involved helps explain why the story has generated such a strong reaction online. Anthony Edwards reportedly signed a Minnesota Timberwolves contract worth approximately $244 million over 5 years, a figure the hosts essentially rounded to about $250 million for simplicity. Beyond that NBA contract, he reportedly has an Adidas endorsement arrangement worth roughly $50 million across 5 years. Put those two numbers together, and you're looking at approximately $300 million over a 5-year period, or around $60 million annually when averaged out. Now, put that figure beside the reported settlement, and the contrast becomes much easier to understand. If you conceptually divide $1 million across 18 years of a child's life, you're talking about just over $55,000 per year. Then compare that with approximately $60 million in annual earnings, and the financial gap becomes extremely difficult to overlook. That comparison is essentially what fuels the emotional side of the entire conversation. The hosts aren't pretending that $1 million isn't significant in ordinary life. Obviously it is. For most people on the planet, having $1 million could completely change their financial circumstances, create long-term security, and remove enormous amounts of everyday stress. The real argument is about proportion, and that's where this entire debate gets complicated. When one side of an agreement is reportedly bringing in around $60 million every year, while the other accepted a tiny fraction of a single year's income as a supposedly permanent settlement involving their shared child, the optics alone are enough to raise eyebrows, regardless of whether the original agreement ultimately holds up legally. And this is where one host introduces an analogy that basically becomes the defining image of the entire discussion. He compares the situation to shopping at a dollar store. The phrase comes up repeatedly, almost like a running theme, because it takes an extremely complicated financial and legal dispute and turns it into one simple, powerful picture. The point he's making is that the woman allegedly accepted a figure that, compared with Anthony Edwards' actual earning power, looks almost insignificant, like picking up something at a dollar store instead of recognizing the full value of what was potentially on the table. But once that agreement was signed and the settlement was finalized, the host's position became pretty direct and, frankly, unforgiving. You can't simply reopen the deal later because you eventually realize just how much money the other person is making. An agreement is an agreement. If future income increases weren't addressed, or if the settlement wasn't designed to change when a rookie contract eventually became a massive max-level deal, then the responsibility for that omission would seemingly fall on whoever accepted the terms and the legal or financial professionals advising them at the time. However, that seemingly simple argument runs directly into a much more complicated legal question that the hosts eventually acknowledge. If the current allegations are accurate, and Anthony Edwards actually gave false testimony about his business activities, or deliberately moved assets through trusts or other people's names to make himself harder to collect from, or to obscure income relevant to support calculations, then the entire situation takes on a completely different meaning. That would not simply be someone wishing they had negotiated a better deal. That could potentially involve misleading the court, which carries serious legal consequences, including possible criminal exposure if perjury were ultimately proven. Even when the hosts appear sympathetic toward Anthony Edwards, they still make an important distinction. If he truly concealed assets or knowingly misrepresented his financial situation under oath, then we're talking about an entirely different level of wrongdoing than a mother simply regretting the settlement she accepted. Then there's the California jurisdiction issue, another major piece of the story that the hosts spend considerable time examining, and it's important because this is exactly the kind of detail viewers can easily overlook.
The dispute reportedly raises questions about California jurisdiction, with claims that the mother has continued attempting to pursue proceedings there, even though a judge has reportedly instructed her to take the matter back to Georgia. The hosts find that detail almost ironically funny because, as they point out, Anthony Edwards doesn't even play for a California franchise. His team is the Minnesota Timberwolves, so naturally the question becomes, what exactly gives California courts jurisdiction over his personal or business affairs in the first place? The implication raised during the discussion, partly joking but clearly intentional, is that California may be getting pursued strategically, rather than simply because it is the obvious location connected to the people involved, with the state carrying a reputation for family law rules that can potentially benefit someone seeking greater support, and a Los Angeles legal market known for handling high-profile paternity and financial disputes. One host sums up that cynical perspective by arguing that California attorneys understand where the leverage is and know how to pursue money when the stakes are high. It's certainly a skeptical interpretation, but it points toward a larger pattern that has repeatedly appeared in disputes involving wealthy athletes and entertainers, where choosing the most favorable jurisdiction can become a strategic battle all by itself. In some cases, that fight over jurisdiction can become nearly as important as the original financial disagreement. And it's worth stepping back for a moment and asking why stories like this explode so dramatically online. Because the reaction isn't really about Anthony Edwards alone. It's connected to a much bigger collection of beliefs and fears that people bring into conversations involving professional athletes, enormous wealth, and paternity disputes. There's a widespread perception, whether completely fair or not, that athletes can become targets because of their earning potential. Some people believe certain relationships begin with financial possibilities already being considered, and once a child enters the picture, the battle over support can shift away from simply meeting the child's actual needs and toward maximizing the amount extracted from the parent's future income. That existing belief system helps explain why a word like devious can land so strongly when one of the hosts uses it, because it immediately connects with a narrative that many viewers already believe. But at the same time, there's another powerful narrative operating in the opposite direction, and you can hear pieces of it throughout this very discussion. That argument is that athletes have historically used their wealth, influence, and access to elite legal teams to reduce support obligations, pressure mothers into settlements that appear generous until you compare them with the athlete's actual wealth, and use legal tactics such as delays, jurisdiction fights, and complicated asset structures to make revisiting an agreement financially and emotionally exhausting. Both perspectives are clearly alive in the public debate, and what's fascinating is that the hosts seem to move between them throughout the conversation, sometimes almost within the same sentence, defending the importance of honoring an original agreement while also admitting that deliberately hiding assets or lying under oath would be a serious violation if those allegations were ever proven. There's another angle here that deserves attention, and that's the discussion about what stories like this communicate to men watching from the outside. One host makes a broader observation that extends beyond Anthony Edwards and touches on a much deeper cultural concern. He argues that situations like this can make some men more reluctant to completely invest in defending, protecting, or fighting for a woman when there's a lingering fear that the same person could later use the relationship against them. The concern is that if someone can allegedly maneuver against you after the relationship ends, then the loyalty, protection, and trust you gave them earlier might eventually feel misplaced or even foolish. That's really a conversation about trust breaking down, because highly public disputes can become cautionary stories that millions of people absorb and remember, especially men in wealthy or highly visible positions who may start thinking differently about relationships and the possibility of having children outside marriage. And there's also an important detail in how the hosts portray Anthony Edwards himself, because underneath much of the criticism is still a noticeable degree of sympathy toward his side of the story.
They emphasize that according to the claims being discussed, Edwards was supposedly clear from the beginning that he wasn't trying to establish a romantic relationship, allegedly telling her that if a child resulted from their situation, he would take responsibility and remain involved as a father, but he wasn't offering a romantic relationship with the mother. The takeaway is that Anthony Edwards allegedly wasn't misleading her because he reportedly made his intentions clear and established those boundaries from the beginning. And the host's argument is that if both people genuinely understood those expectations, then the betrayal narrative becomes much harder to support in the same way it would if there had been actual deception involved. But here's where the discussion gets important, because the hosts, intentionally or otherwise, separate two issues that are constantly mixed together in stories like this. The first issue is the relationship itself, specifically whether Anthony Edwards was truthful about his intentions from day one. The second issue is the legal and financial battle, including whether the settlement was reasonable, whether it reflected his eventual earning power, and whether he allegedly broke the law by concealing assets or giving false testimony under oath. Those are two completely different questions, and that's a major reason this story has become so explosive, because public reactions often merge them together and use an opinion about one issue as proof of what supposedly happened with the other. Now let's slow down and examine the perjury allegation, because that part deserves far more than a quick mention. Lying while under oath isn't some insignificant technical violation. It attacks one of the basic pillars of the justice system, because courts rely on sworn testimony being truthful and depend on meaningful consequences to discourage people from deliberately misleading them. If a court were to determine that Anthony Edwards actually misrepresented his finances, business activities, or the way his assets were structured while under oath, the consequences could go far beyond simply changing a child support calculation. Perjury can potentially result in criminal penalties, including jail time, which is exactly the danger discussed by the hosts. That's a risk neither side can realistically afford to dismiss, and it may help explain why a dispute that could have remained a private family matter has now moved into such a visible legal and media spotlight. Somebody involved evidently believed the allegations were serious enough and the evidence worth presenting that taking the matter into court and public view was preferable to simply keeping everything behind closed doors. Then there's the money management side of the allegations, because phrases like hiding assets in trusts or placing property under another person's name sound explosive, but the underlying financial mechanics are more complicated than they may appear. Trusts, LLCs, and similar structures are perfectly legitimate tools that wealthy people routinely use for estate planning, taxes, privacy, and asset protection. The existence of those structures isn't automatically suspicious. The real issue, if the allegations are ultimately proven, would be whether those tools were deliberately used to conceal income from a court while someone had a legal support obligation, effectively turning legitimate financial structures into a way of avoiding responsibility. That's a much more specific and serious allegation than simply owning a trust or operating through an LLC. And proving something like that would require detailed financial investigation, documentation, forensic accounting, and legal discovery, rather than internet speculation. When you put all these pieces together, the segment reveals something surprisingly rare in celebrity commentary: genuine uncertainty, even among hosts who normally have strong opinions and aren't afraid to take sides. The hosts repeatedly move between competing positions. They defend the importance of honoring the original agreement while also questioning whether $1 million settlement makes sense compared with what Anthony Edwards is reportedly earning. They characterize the mother's strategy as devious while recognizing that jurisdictional battles and aggressive legal tactics are routinely used by both sides in high-stakes disputes. They give Edwards credit for allegedly being transparent about his intentions, while still treating the perjury allegations as a serious matter, acknowledging that if those claims are proven, this becomes an actual legal problem that can't simply be laughed off with dollar store comparisons. And honestly, that uncertainty may be the most reasonable reaction to a situation this complicated. because the complete truth about what happened, what the two sides actually agreed to, what Anthony Edwards' financial structure truly looks like, and whether any sworn testimony was knowingly false cannot be determined by commentators reacting from the outside to headlines and court documents. What can be examined, however, is the size of the stakes, the money involved, the competing motivations, and the cultural issues. That makes a case like this resonate far beyond the people directly involved. You have a young NBA star reportedly earning generational wealth. You have a mother dealing with the consequences of a relationship that, according to the claims being discussed, was never supposed to become a traditional long-term partnership. You have a settlement that might look substantial when viewed by itself, but suddenly appears very different when placed beside a 9-figure professional contract. And now there's an escalating legal dispute involving jurisdiction questions and allegations of perjury, making it very possible that we've only seen the beginning of this story. What happens next will likely come down to evidence, financial records, discovery, and whatever documentation exists concerning how Anthony Edwards' assets were structured, along with whether any statements he made under oath can actually be demonstrated to have been false. If the court ultimately sides with the mother and finds credible evidence that assets were concealed or that perjury occurred, Anthony Edwards could potentially face serious financial and personal consequences. But if the court determines that the original settlement was a legitimate, binding agreement freely accepted by both sides and finds no misconduct beyond the simple fact that Edwards now earns dramatically more money, then the attempt to reopen those terms could fall apart, potentially leaving the mother with the original settlement and limited options for additional support. Either way, you can expect a major public reaction because stories sitting at the intersection of celebrity, fatherhood, and enormous wealth rarely disappear without leaving a mark. Instead, they become examples people bring up the next time another athlete or public figure faces a similar dispute, continuing that familiar cycle of speculation, criticism, and cultural debate that this segment itself is feeding into. And there's a bigger sports business pattern here that cannot be ignored, because Anthony Edwards is hardly the first young superstar to find himself caught in this kind of situation. We've seen the cycle repeatedly. An athlete signs an early career contract, becomes a father before or soon after entering the league, and agrees to financial terms based on the income he has at that particular stage of his career. Then everything changes a few years later when that same player lands a massive extension, a supermax contract, or a huge endorsement deal, and suddenly the settlement that once looked reasonable appears incredibly small compared with the athlete's new financial reality. This pattern has appeared across different sports, leagues, and generations, and it raises a legitimate question that often gets buried once the internet starts arguing over personalities. Should support agreements involving young athletes be permanently locked in when their earning potential can explode almost overnight? Some people believe these agreements should contain automatic escalation provisions connected to future income, specifically so disputes like this don't emerge years later. Others believe the entire purpose of a settlement is finality, arguing that a deal loses its value if either side can constantly return to the table whenever circumstances change. That conflict between finality and fairness is really at the center of why cases like this keep coming back into the spotlight. This isn't simply another personal dispute involving Anthony Edwards and one woman. It's part of a much larger unresolved debate about how the legal system should approach support obligations when someone's income can multiply dramatically after signing one life-changing contract. And because there isn't one universally accepted solution, every new celebrity case becomes another example that people use to defend whichever side of the argument they already believe. That's also why the host spends so much time putting the numbers into plain language, breaking down the Timberwolves contract and Adidas deal into rounded figures that the viewer can immediately understand they're doing more than reacting to the drama. They're giving viewers a way to measure the financial gap and think about what proportionality actually means. Because underneath all the accusations, legal terminology, and heated opinions, proportionality is arguably the real issue driving this entire debate. There's another important piece of this story, and that's the influence platforms like podcasts have on how audiences interpret controversial situations before the courts have even reached a final decision. Reaction-based podcasts operate somewhere between entertainment, commentary, and a loose form of public journalism. They don't operate under the same standards as a courtroom, and they aren't necessarily required to establish every allegation as fact before discussing it. What they do is take publicly circulating claims, combine them with personal experiences and cultural perspectives, and turn those pieces into a narrative that viewers can debate, criticize, and share. That influence is significant because for many people watching a segment like this, it may become the only version of the dispute they ever encounter. Most viewers aren't going to sit down and read court filings from beginning to end or follow every legal development until the final ruling. What sticks with them instead is the framing they heard here: the dollar store analogy, the $60 million annual figure, the California jurisdiction issue, and the characterization of someone as devious in a calculated and strategic sense. Those images can remain in the public mind long after the actual legal proceedings have moved on, regardless of what the final outcome says. And that's precisely why one distinction the hosts touch on needs to remain crystal clear, even when the commentary gets entertaining. An allegation is still an allegation. A perjury accusation is not the same thing as a conviction, and an accusation that assets were hidden is not the same as a completed forensic accounting finding. Everything being discussed here exists within the world of claims made by one side against another, passing through court filings, media coverage, and commentary built on top of that coverage. The most responsible way to follow a story like this, even while appreciating the host's sharp observations and strong opinions, is to remain open about the outcome and recognize that both Anthony Edwards and the mother of his child have reasons to present the version of events most favorable to their own position. Until the legal process plays out, the complete picture simply isn't available. In the meantime, don't expect this controversy to disappear anytime soon, because it touches far too many sensitive issues and is almost guaranteed to keep generating headlines and heated debate. We're talking about generational wealth, fatherhood outside marriage, trust between former partners, and questions about whether the legal system operates fairly when extraordinary amounts of money are involved. And that's probably the biggest takeaway of all. The real story isn't about declaring a winner from the sidelines, but understanding how quickly a private relationship can become an enormously complicated legal, emotional, and financial battle once it collides with the reality of professional sports money.